Hello everyone, welcome to this week's story of ESK's Late Eve Horror Stories. The character and concept of this story do not belong to me. It belongs to the horror artist Trevor Henderson. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's story. Chapter 1: Civilian Encounter. Dave was a huge fan of cartoons. He remembers watching Tom and Jerry, Felix the Cat, and Looney Tunes when he was young. When he grew older, he began buying and collecting memorabilia. It was midnight when he was walking home from the cartoon convention. Dave was carrying 2 bags full to bursting with all sorts of merchandise. He was in a joyful mood and couldn't wait to get back home. The convention closed at 9 p.m., but he stayed to greet some of the cartoonists. He started out the walk home joyful, but then began to regret staying so late. Everyone else was in their comfortable homes as they went home earlier. Dave decided that tomorrow he would just buy a car. Even though it was a small town, there are still loads of criminals and hooligans. The very thought of getting mugged sent a shiver down Dave's spine. Suddenly, Dave began to feel as though he was being watched. He looked behind him and saw 2 large eyes in the dark. He scrubbed his eyes and they were gone. Dave chuckled to himself. He had been at the cartoon convention extremely long after all. He was sure he was seeing things. He decided that when he gets home, he will make himself a quick dinner and go to sleep. Dave walked past an alleyway when he heard groaning coming from it. The groaning sounded like a slowed-down cat's meow. He took a look of curiosity and saw something that made him freeze up. It was a tall, dark figure with cat ears and huge eyes. It had a terrifying smile with yellow teeth, and it had extremely long arms and white cartoon gloves. It waved at Dave, and he could swear he heard it giggle. It then began slowly advancing towards him. Dave snapped back to reality and ran off. He didn't know if it was some cosplayer with a sick sense of humor or some criminal, but he wasn't about to stay to find out. Dave looked behind him and saw the cat figure, but it wasn't chasing him. Heck, it wasn't even moving at all. Dave felt the weight of his bags and decided that his life was more important than nostalgia. He dropped the bags on the ground regretfully and continued running. He looked behind him and saw that the cat figure was gone. His bags were still on the ground. Was it really just a cosplayer pulling a prank? He slowly walked towards the bags and picked them up. He then realized that he could just call a taxi. He was so excited that he forgot about calling one. But right as Dave was about to turn on his phone, he felt a heavy thud. He was pinned to the ground by the cat figure and his phone fell into the gutter. Dave was able to get a closer look at the cartoon cat, perhaps too close. He realized that it wasn't a person in a costume. It wasn't even a person for that matter. The cartoon cat opened its mouth widely. Dave attempted to strangle it, but its neck grew longer. Dave pushed the cartoon cat with all his might and ran off like a cheetah. He did not care what belongings he left behind as long as he got as far away from that monster as possible. Finally got to his house and opened the door. He shut it behind him and locked it. He locked every door and window in the house. He could hear snoring coming from one of the rooms. His roommate Jay was asleep. He sat down on the couch feeling as though he was about to puke and was covered in dirt and sweat. But he felt too sick to make himself dinner and decided to just go to sleep. But first he went to call the police. But would they believe him? He decided to just take his chances and call the police. But right as he got up, he heard knocking on the door. That knocking turned into banging. Suddenly, it stopped. Dave looked out of the front window and saw nothing. He breathed a sigh of relief and went over to the phone. He called 911 and told them about his encounter. But right when the call was about to come to an end, Dave heard a window breaking, groaning, and Jay screaming. It had followed him home. Dave quickly told the dispatcher what happened in a panicked voice. They said the police would be at the house right away. But by the time they got there, Dave and Jay were already dead. Chapter 2: Police Investigation. It has been a day since the murders of Jay and Dave. Charles was a police officer who was working on the killer cat case for 2 months. There have been murders and disappearances. Victims of those murders were found beaten to death, bitten in half, or torn apart. Some of these crime scenes had a silhouette of a cat head painted with blood on the walls. For these 2 months, the police had no idea who was responsible for these atrocities. But after 2 months of no leads, the first surviving witness entered the police station out of nowhere. He was pretty shaken up and breathing fast. He was interviewed by Charles and his partner Jake. They had to calm the interviewee down. "It's okay, just breathe slowly," said Charles. It took a few minutes for the interviewee to calm down. "Alright, here's my story," said the interviewee. "My name is Kyle. I was driving home from my mom's house after visiting her. My car was running low on gas since it was a long drive. I stopped at the nearest gas station. It was pretty dark out, but I felt happy the gas station's lights were on. I have a fear of the dark. Anyways, as I was filling up my car, I heard a weird groaning sound coming from inside the convenience store. It sounded like some sort of slowed up meow of a cat. I decided not to worry about it and continued filling up my car. Suddenly the store's lights turned off and there was horrible screaming coming from the store. The lights turned back on, but standing in the cashier's place was instead a tall, dark cat figure. It had a big smile and looked out of place compared to its cartoony body. Its eyes were huge and bright, and it had gloves that looked like something a cartoon character would wear. It waved at me and the lights turned off yet again. They turned back on a second later and the cat figure was gone. I did not notice that my car was now full. I got into the car and drove off, but not before calling 911. As I was driving, I saw something that nearly gave me a heart attack. That cat thing was standing in the middle of the road. I stepped on the brakes, but the cat thing deliberately ran at my car as it was slowing down. I escaped from my burning car and ran as fast as I could. As I looked back, I saw that the cat figure got up, completely unscathed, still smiling. I was lucky to be near the police station, so this is how I got here. "Were you able to snap a picture?" asked Charles. "Well, it's hard to snap a picture of something trying to kill you, so no. My car had a dash cam, but it was destroyed along with the car. It has been an hour since I was attacked. I fear that thing would find me." "Do not worry," said Jake. "We will be able to take it down. Right, Charles?" Charles was looking down. "Charles!" yelled Jake. "What? Oh, yeah, Jake is right. Right, we will stop it one way or the other," said Charles. He sounded doubtful. "How about you stay here for the night, Kyle? That thing is probably looking around," said Jay while looking at Charles with confusion. Yeah, sure, I would like that," Kyle spoke with immense relief. Charles and Jake had a conversation in the lounge room after the interview. "What was that about?" asked Jake. "What do you mean?" "You were hesitant to reassure the victim that the monster will be brought to justice. Look, whatever we're dealing with here, it does not seem human," responded Charles. "Are you sure it even is a monster? Could it be some sort of cleverly designed puppet or something?" responded Jake. "Look, there have been dozens of people going missing or being found dead over the past 2 months. Are you sure this is just the work of a murderer? All these incidents seem to be linked to that cat thing. It survived a car crash and was somehow able to teleport to different places, or it is just very fast. Now, remember those cat head silhouettes on the walls at the crime scenes? That cat monster was definitely responsible for that." Charles was now breathing heavily. After piecing it all together, it began to make sense, and the look of contempt of Jake's face told Charles that he finally agreed. "It is starting to make sense," said Jake, "but we don't know what that cat thing is, or where it came from." We can try doing some research on the internet," said Charles. "Good idea, but our shifts are over. We can resume the case tomorrow," said Jake. Good night then," said Charles. "Night." Charles woke up the next morning to his alarm clock. He had a small bowl of oatmeal for breakfast before heading to the station. Jake was already there. "Morning, Jake. Let's get started," said Charles. He began looking through all the town's recorded crimes on a computer. 1990, a few shoplifts. 1980, an arson. There doesn't seem to be anything related to that cat thing, said Charles. Finally, we reached the late 30s, just a few years after the town was founded. The crimes documented were vandalism, disappearances, and murders. Alright, said Jake. Looks like this is what we are looking for. It says here that there were cat head silhouettes painted with blood on the walls, said Charles. It also says that in 1940 the murders just stopped. No one knew who did it. But we do now, said Jake. But why did it just return after all these years? Asked Charles. Jake thought about it for a whole minute. His eyes widened and he got a look of realization on his face. It might seem crazy what I'm about to say, but it went on its murder spree in the 30s, right? Yes, responded Charles. Well, there were all sorts of black and white cartoons back then, like Felix the Cat, and the descriptions Kyle gave us seemed pretty reminiscent of those cartoons. Think about it. Big, bright eyes, cartoon gloves, and a dark humanoid with cat features, said Jake. That just sounds like it, Charles responded again. It sounds crazy, but makes sense at the same time. Well, how is that important? Why can't you understand it, Charles? We need to learn as much as we can about that cartoon cat. Every piece of information is important. We need to alert the news to raise awareness. But then Jake froze. Oh, damn it! What is it? Asked Charles. We have forgotten to make a sketch. Do not worry. You remember how Kyle described the thing? Said Charles, hoping to calm Jake down. Yeah, responded Jake. He seemed to be a lot more calm now. We can draw a sketch right now or ask Kyle for more information. Good idea, said Jake. Before they could call Kyle, who was already back home, they got another visitor, and this one was holding a camcorder in his hand. Chapter 3: Paranormal Investigation. Hello. It has been a while since I posted a blog, but I had an experience so terrifying recently that I thought I would post again. It has been a year since the whole cinema incident. It took a whole month for me to finally accept that the thing that haunted my nightmares was truly gone. Since then, I have been making money by working at the local diner. Paranormal vlogs have become a bit of a pastime for me. Instead of risking my life, I would make fake videos of high effort. I would still be honest and state there was only an act in the video's descriptions, but there was one video I made that wasn't fake. Though I did manage to get over it. I'm not just making money to make ends meet. I'm making money so I could one day leave this backwater town. I moved here after graduating from film school. I chose this place because the rent was cheap. Just a few days after living here, I saw why it was so cheap to live here. The town is boring, it is a great spot for criminals, and as far as I know, there is weird crap going on here. A major disappointment about this town is that it used to be wealthy. This town has a mall that used to be open, but in the 70s it closed down due to health violations or whatever. The cinema burning didn't help matters either. Because of the mall closing down, the unemployment rate went up. There was then a whole other chain of events that caused this town to cripple. After everything, the cinema was the only source of this town's entertainment. So after it caught fire and closed down, many people moved to better towns and cities. I am planning to do so myself in the future. For now, I am working in the diner, trying to save up enough money to move. 2 months ago, I saw on the news that there was a killer on the loose. The crime scenes had cat head silhouettes painted on the walls with blood. After seeing the news, I was praying that I would be able to make enough money soon, unless I wanted to be next. Some people I knew began packing their bags and moving to the city. I asked them to keep in touch before they left. I began asking my boss for a raise, but that greedy bastard refused. Then I had an idea. I could find that killer, snap a photo or record a video, escape before the killer sees me, upload the video to earn views and money, take the evidence to the police, and if the killer gets caught, I get paid. But a part of me was wondering, is it worth it to risk my life for money? This is something I was thinking about for a whole month and a half. Should I let the police deal with this? That's what I did. but the police barely did anything other than investigate the crime scenes. 2 months later, I realized I was behind on my rent. My boss was barely paying me, so the next day, when I went to work, I decided I was going to ask my boss for a raise again. But when I entered the diner, I saw my boss putting his stuff in a box. "What are you doing?" I asked him. "Didn't you hear?" he responded. "One of the employees was killed." "Jay?" I responded. Working at the diner was only my boss, me, and Jay. "Yeah, the killer broke into his home, killed him and his roommate. I decided to sell the place and use the money to move to the city. Are you at least going to split the money with me?" "Sorry, Matt," he said, "but I need the extra money for food and rent." But before he could leave, I blocked the exit, furious. "Listen here, I worked my ass off, so you can give me a raise. And did you give me that raise? No ho ho. The least you could do is give me a small portion of the money you got. And you can't even do that. I don't want to spend another second in this backward town without lunatic running around." I hoped that I would be able to get through to him, but all I did was make him angry. "Get out of the way, Matt," he said through gritted teeth. "Not until you give me that raise I always wanted. I said get out of the way, or I will sue you for all the remaining money your broke ass got." I couldn't believe the audacity he had to threaten me, but I knew better than to risk my money, so I got out of his way. I decided to look for anything in the building to sell, but he stripped the place clean. He probably sold that stuff too, but when I got back to my home, I saw an eviction notice on my door. I have been getting these 9 times for the past year, and yet I'm able to pay my rent before getting evicted. But now that I have lost my job, I realized that I needed money quickly. So I got my bag and packed it with a flashlight, camcorder, a crucifix, and finally, my trusty revolver and a double-barrel shotgun At 5 p.m., I headed to the abandoned mall. Why the abandoned mall, you may ask? Because that's where most of the disappearances occurred. Policemen who would go in there never returned. Because of that, there is a barbed wire fence guarding the mall. I knew of the risks, but I am too desperate to care. As I reached the mall, I realized I should have brought some wire cutters. I was looking for a way past the fence when I found an opening. It was really large for one person, so I wondered why whoever trespassed would go through the trouble of making such a large opening. I went through the fence with ease. The outside of the dirt mall was filthy. It had a ton of graffiti and was partially overtaken by nature. As I stood at the entrance, I got a sense of foreboding. Was it really worth it? After all, those who went inside never returned. The words written with blood above the entrance didn't help matters. "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here," it said. What if the killer isn't your typical serial killer? What if they, or it, is something much worse? I dealt with a violent spirit after all. What if a theater patron and the killer are connected? I remembered that I had 2 guns and a crucifix in my backpack. Whatever I was dealing with here, I had faith that I would return alive. I breathed, took out my flashlight, and went inside. The inside of a dirt mall was even worse than it was outside. It was dark, and there were vines everywhere. It was also a huge mess. There was a ton of stuff on the floor, including glass. I took out my camcorder and began recording. I pointed my flashlight at the floor and saw a bunch of rats skitter away. I hope that there weren't any bigger animals in there with me. Suddenly, there was a horrible stench, a stench that I recognized to be the same one from the cinema. The stench was coming from the food court. I walked over there, and what I saw was something out of my worst nightmares. I would rather not say what I saw, but let's just say I found what happened to those missing people. I decided that I will have to cut that part out of the video. Suddenly I heard footsteps. Large footsteps. I decided that I should hide. I quickly ran over to one of the food booths and hid behind there. I dared not to look, so I placed my camcorder outside the booth to record whatever it is that is in the food court. Suddenly, I heard crunching noises. I was right. That can't be a human. It has to be some monster, or it is just a bear or a cougar. I took out my shotgun to be safe. Then the crunching stopped. I heard some loud stomps again. Lucky for me, they were getting quieter, not louder. I grabbed my camcorder to see what it captured. What I saw next was way worse than the missing people I found here. I was right. It is a monster. The monster was a tall, dark, humanoid cat figure. It had large, soulless eyes and a grotesque, blood-stained smile. It also had white gloves. It looked like a twisted version of an old-school cartoon cat. I then remembered that this was not my first time seeing that cat thing. I recognized those large, soulless eyes from the night I escaped the cinema. It was staring at me in an alleyway, but I thought it was just my paranoia getting to me. In the video, the cartoon cat bent down and began eating. And guess what? That thing took pleasure from this. It never stopped smiling. I then noticed that one of the people on the floor was alive. Throughout the whole video, he was staring at the camera and blinking SOS in Morse code. After the cat was done, it got up, but not before turning around to look at the camcorder. Its sick smile widened, and then it just walked away. Was it toying with me? I realized I had everything I needed. I decided that I would take the camcorder with me, rescue the survivor, and get out of there as fast as we could. But before I got up, I felt breathing down my neck. I slowly turned around sweating and saw something that will haunt me forever. The cartoon cat was behind me. It was smiling. I got a better look at its teeth. Its teeth were yellow and blood-stained, and its gums were huge and filthy. When it giggled, I was broken out of my trance and ran for it, but then its arm stretched down and grabbed my leg. I fell to the ground and panicked as it dragged me towards it. The survivor then got up and grabbed my hand in an effort to save me, but his efforts were futile as our hands got sweaty and ended up letting go. Luckily, as it was dragging me towards it, I was able to grab my shotgun. Just as it opened its mouth widely, I shot it. It let go of me, but it was still smiling. I barely did any damage to it as the bullet holes in the monster's mouth closed up. It began slowly walking towards me. It moved like a rubber hose cartoon. It was dragging its long arms on the ground, still smiling. I grabbed the survivor's hand and we ran to the exit, but it was boarded up. I used the last round in my shotgun to break the boards, and we bolted out of there as fast as we could. The sun was setting and the cat went through the exit. Me and the survivor ran through the opening in the fence and escaped. The cartoon cat didn't go outside the fence though, and merely stood there smiling at us, and went back inside. Me and the survivor stood there for a whole minute, processing what we just went through. After that, me and him went to our homes and decided to keep in touch. While home, I uploaded the video and went to bed. I woke up to a ton of views and subscribers. After breakfast, I called my new friend and we headed to the police station. I delivered the evidence and was interviewed by the police along with John, which is the survivor's name. The police gave me a reward and I wanted to share a portion of it with John. But he refused and said that I saved his life. I finally got enough money to move out, so that's what I did. But I still live in fear of that cartoon cat. I explained to the police that gunfire didn't work against it. The best they can do is contain it. So they built a concrete wall in an attempt to prevent the thing from escaping. I had a conversation with John on the phone, and he said that the murders and disappearances finally stopped. Which is good, but as far as I know, the monster is alive and is biding its time. Chapter 4. Epilogue. Cartoon cat laughed to itself. It knew it could easily escape the walls with ease, but chose to let the people believe that they were safe from it forever. But it will resume its spree of atrocities in the future. It went to the food court and did the Coco the Clown dance in front of its dead audience. When it was done, it laughed. It knew that it was immortal. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of ESK's Late Eve Horror Stories. This story took me a while to make, but I love how it turned out in the end. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Have a good night.